Welcome to Digestible Academia, a blue sky thinking podcast where we break down complex academic research into something a bit more digestible. Each week, we will choose a topic to discuss and do a deep dive into some of the most interesting articles published on Blue Sky Thinking about that topic. We'll be discussing the finding of the research and why it's relevant to you. Today's episode's all about well-being. We'll be taking a deep dive into some of the most interesting research that has recently come out about well-being, including could Instagram be good for your mental health? How can you avoid being burnt out? And how neuroticism can make working from home impossible. I'm your host, Chloe Lane, and this is my co-host, Kerry Ruffle.
Hi.
And today we are joined by a senior account manager at Blue Sky Education, Johnny Stone.
Hello.
Thanks for being on the podcast, Johnny.
No, thank you for having me.
How are you today?
I'm good. I'm excited to talk about well-being in the workplace. So
Good. Yeah, we've got some exciting articles to discuss today. So starting off, we will be discussing an article about should you delete Instagram to protect your mental health? Now, I know you're on Instagram, Kerry.
I am, but I don't feel like you can base a good case study on me because I'm not a typical user.
Okay, how so?
I'm the lurker on social media.
The lurker.
The lurker.
No.
I'm the person that I have the Facebook, I have the Instagram, I even delved into TikTok, although I don't understand it. And I'm the person that I will scroll on what everybody else is doing and I flick through people's stories and I search and I look, but I very rarely post myself. So I think if you look at my profile, the last post that I made was Christmas last year.
Quite a while ago then.
I think you'd be
before
surprised though, sorry, Kerry, that the number of people that probably don't actually contribute to all these really major social media platforms, X or Twitter, it's probably the most famous one for people. It's only really celebrities or people with sizable followings that actually regularly contribute to these platforms. Most probably just look at it, probably past judgment. They might like, that kind of stuff. They might retweet maybe.
But now I'm feeling attacked, so I clearly don't have a following.
No, maybe. Listen, I don't actually have any social media. I used to have
really?
Facebook. Forgot the password so many moons ago. But I've never had Instagram. Obviously, I have a work X, as I'm sure everyone follows me.
Everyone.
We do.
Everyone. And I don't think I've ever actually tweeted. That's terrible. I'm sure I've shared the occasional important update, but. Yeah, I don't know.
Why is that then? Why did you decide not to have you never had Instagram? Have you never had...
No.
So you said you had Facebook.
I had Facebook back in the day, back when everyone, the turn of the generation, when we're like 12 years old and, everyone's got one. So I just created one. But then I very quickly realised I don't actually have much to say. I realised it's probably not the best way for a podcast guest to introduce himself, but I just realised I had nothing. When I had, because I originally had back in the day when it's called Twitter, I had Twitter, but again, I had nothing to tweet about. I don't feel the need to. Now, this isn't passing judgment on those that do enjoy, regularly engaging with their following. I just don't have anything to say. But I completely understand that the power of those platforms, particularly like say TikTok and stuff like that. The marketing power is, it's so well documented now.
Yeah.
So you generally might not watch reels or anything like that then if you don't have those?
No. Behind the camera that I'm not supposed to look at is our social media expert uses the word reels. I'm still not fully sure.
You don't know what a reel is?
No. But it's okay. I won't lose sleep over that. It's okay. It's fine. It's fine. You guys know.
Wow.
And what are your reels like, Harry?
I have never posted a story. I don't engage. I scroll. I don't.
Okay, so when you're scrolling, what do your reels look like?
Again, because I'm not the most typical user, I don't think the algorithm really knows who I am. I feel like it's based on my gender and my age and not my interests. So, I'm in mid to late 30s, I'm female. So I get parenting, I get cleaning, I get what's in the middle aisle in Aldi.
I get those too.
I don't get anything, I'm not seeing extreme sports or dash cam footage or I'm not even getting like beauty hacks and things. I'm guessing I'm too old for that now. But yeah, the algorithm that I get is just not, it doesn't reflect who I think I am, but because I don't put anything into it.
Are you not deeply fascinated by what's going on in the middle aisle at Aldi? I mean, I know I would be. I might not be a woman in her mid-late 30s, but I still would like to know each week what's the update.
I'm not
for the
saying
middle
I
of
don't
Aldi.
enjoy them.
No, of course, why not?
Yeah, so I mean, I use Instagram and TikTok quite often.
Yeah.
And I recently got engaged. So mine is mainly just wedding stuff at the moment, and it's a lot. So I recently deleted Instagram and TikTok so that I could have some time away from those things, because it was all just getting very overwhelming. But yeah, it's interesting that you have such a different experience with it.
Yeah. So
and you don't use it at all.
what were you using social media for then? If you say like it gets a lot, it gets a bit much, and you have to then physically go in and delete it and get rid. How were you engaging with it to the point where you then thought, oh, this is too much, I need to step back?
Yeah.
So I do post quite a lot, I think,
Okay.
compared to the average user. Not stories necessarily, but I like posting on my actual grid. And I find that quite a positive experience. But when I'm consuming other people's content, it's different if it's my friends, but if just random people's content, I find that I compare myself quite a lot to, for the wedding stuff, for example, like other people have planned a lot more than I have, and I feel like I've got too much to do. And that feels a bit stressful. And you don't always want that. I mean, sometimes it's good for ideas, and it depends on your headspace, I think, when you're using it.
Yeah.
But I do find like having a bit of a break can do me good.
Yeah.
And obviously loads of research has suggested that social media can have a negative effect on your well-being and mental health. But new research from Syed Business School has found that social media can actually have a positive effect on adults' mental well-being, which I thought was really, really surprising. They conducted a 6-month study on 1,029 adults, monitoring participants' daily time using social platforms on their mobile. I think the key thing with this study as well is they didn't ask users how much they're using it. They monitored it themselves because they didn't think that they would report accurately. Because they might be embarrassed, or they might not see like mindless scrolling time as time that they actually were using it. They wouldn't report that accurately. And they found that time spent interacting with friends and family on social media platforms had a positive effect on their psychological well-being.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I can understand that, because that is the same as picking up the phone and chatting to a family member, or, you know, looking through the photo album, isn't it? You've met up with a member of family that you've not seen for months, and you have a little catch up on their lives. Yeah. If you're looking at their social media, you're looking at their Instagram stories, you can see what they've been up to and where they've been and them enjoying their lives. And that's because it's someone that you're personally connected to, that's nice. Whereas I suppose if you're looking at celebrities and sort of aspirational figures, and you're seeing everything that they're doing, going back to your wedding planning and looking at all these different things going on, and maybe then you think, okay, I'm not doing enough, or my life doesn't look like that. And because you don't know the reality of it, perhaps.
So does that beg the question then? It's not necessarily the amount of usage of social media, but it's what it's used for.
Exactly.
Is that okay?
Yeah. So do you use WhatsApp, for example?
I do use WhatsApp. I mean, I prefer just regular, like, I mean, I have an iPhone, so I prefer iMessage and whatnot. But yeah, no, WhatsApp. I mean, I guess this study isn't all that surprising. A lot of the research that we come across isn't that surprising. It kind of grounds what we already kind of suspect.
Yeah.
In data and proof, right? So, I mean, I guess this one is interesting because I guess some might argue it's counterintuitive, because obviously it's going against the grain. The kind of wealth of content out there is pointing to the dangers of social media, particularly the kind of like meta-run Instagram and Facebook and stuff like that. I mean, Facebook, back when it was, you know, the moment that it kind of came to be, it's always been dogged with criticisms that, you know, how is it impacting our sense of self, right? And that will probably always be, that's never going to change, no matter what policies, you know, firms pursue, no matter what regulations we put in place. It's never really, because there's always going to be a way around it, right? But I don't know, I guess it makes sense that for some, actually, no, it can boost your kind of well-being. It can be an enjoyment. I mean, that's the thing. You can't have these blunt instruments of, this is a policy. I mean, now you guess that you have to have a policy for everyone, but it's always going to leave some feeling somewhat alienated. But I think that's what's fascinating, is that I guess it's a new take on something. It's such a complex subject. Yeah, you know. Yeah, no, it's really, really interesting research. And it's just another example of the interesting work that comes out of some of the schools.
Yeah. I mean, I think it comes down to, it's how you engage. It's whether you're reaching out or whether you're doing things in isolation.
Yeah.
I think if you're engaging with friends and family, it is like sitting and having a chat with someone you've not caught up with in a while. It's seeing a life that you're connected to. And that's nice. That's positive. That gives you a nice feeling. It's something to gain.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you are just scrolling and looking at people that you've got no connection to or people that you admire, but there's nothing beyond that, it is quite isolating. And that goes into what you were saying about that negative impact of social media and monitoring screen time and people being influenced, but also people that sit there and lose hours, 2 hours scrolling at things, but not having a conversation.
I guess that begs the question, though, whose responsibility is it then? Because if it's how it's being used that can lead to the negativity, is it responsibility of the providers to tell us how to use social media platforms? Is the onus on us to be smart, so to speak, about how we use it? Like, I honestly don't know. I genuinely don't know what the answer is. I've as I've just mentioned, I'm not the preempty, kind of like talking what you might already have in mind. We've seen in the news about all these updates, particularly around Meta and whatnot.
Yeah.
I don't think necessarily they're going to work. In terms of, these teen accounts, I don't necessarily think it's going to work, because I remember when I first set up a Facebook account when I was like 12. Did I say that I was 12 years old? No, I probably said something like I was 17 or 18.
I think I did that. I actually did that on Twitter, and then later they banned me for being underage.
They figured it out?
Even though, they figured it out when I was 20.
Wow.
That I lied when I was 13.
How did they
12.
figure that out, though?
I don't know. I think I changed my birthday or something.
That's how deep
And then
the
they said-
backlog of complaints is at Twitter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I got banned at 20 for being underage.
Banned at 20.
Yeah.
Damn, you're not old enough.
Exactly. So interestingly, Dr. Matt Johnson, who's a professor in psychology and marketing at Hull International Business School, said that the reason that time goes so quickly when you're scrolling is because social media is disrupting your memory.
Okay.
So to process an event and build a memory for it, your brain needs some downtime. And that's the one thing these videos, when you're scrolling, they just don't give you that. As you're scrolling, each new video disrupts the memory for the last video. He says that once the next video begins, it's like the last one never happened. So when you're scrolling for hours and hours and hours, you might come away from that thinking the time's gone really quickly, but then just not remembering a single thing that you actually watched.
And I can understand that, because you're not taking the time to step back and think about what you've just seen, because you're then on to the next.
Yeah.
And it gets prompted, isn't it? If you think about things like TikTok, where the next video just comes up every time, it just comes up. You don't even have to start looking for it.
Yeah.
So you can see how people lose time.
Yeah.
And they say you come off your phone, you think, oh, I've lost half an hour.
Yeah, but you can't remember a single thing you've learned. Or you might remember little bits.
Yeah. It's interesting that I think you used the word in that kind of explanation of downtime or something like that. And it's interesting because most people will use it as a pressure valve, right?
Yeah.
They scroll endlessly through, often nowadays it's often TikTok, because it's a form of, it's like releasing pressure from a very mentally taxing world.
Yeah.
It actually soothes us. And yet, it's almost I guess a juxtaposition maybe isn't the right way of phrasing it, but it's almost contradictory that there's no downtime, but people are often using it as downtime.
I think by downtime they just mean that space where you don't think of anything and you process what you've just read or watched.
Yeah. But I guess that's interesting.
But when do we have that now?
No, I guess not. But then I guess the fact that you're quite literally probably not really concentrating much, because it's the same with any kind of, sometimes you could be watching TV, a very old school medium, and not really be taking much in.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I love the TV is a very old school medium.
That's that. You'll get my interest in TV. TV.
People are at home watching TV, but they're probably scrolling on their phones at the same time, because we don't just sit and do one thing. Because I think you're quite right. Your attention often is quite diverted.
Yeah,
you might be scrolling, but also you're doing that whilst you're sitting on a train. Yeah. So you've got that distraction of the world whizzing by and things going. You've got a coffee on the go, but it doesn't detract from the fact that you can quite mindlessly lose that time in a phone. I mean, that's why when you look at child development and things, they say to monitor screen time and to police what your kids look at, because otherwise they end up spending more time than they realise tapping away and flicking through things that they'd probably spend their time better elsewhere.
Exactly. And this study about the positive mental well-being, that's only tested on adults. So do you think that teenagers and children, for example, might have a different effect?
I mean,
different outcome.
I've got no sort of qualification to back me up in any of my opinions, but I do think
we hired you on the basis that you had a PhD in...
Sorry to disappoint, Johnny. Sorry to disappoint.
So would you let your child, for example, scroll through these social media platforms? And if so, what age would you allow that, do you think?
Now, that is so tricky because he's too young
Yeah.
to be able
He's only
to do
5, right?
This is it. He's only 5. So we've not had to cross that minefield yet of when does he access social media? When do I give him a phone? All that sort of stuff. But I'd like to think I'd shield him from it until he's a bit bigger, because I have a niece who's a teenager. She uses social media, and the thought of it makes me wince, because I imagine being 15, 16, if I'd have had that, it would have been awful, I think, because you can't really escape. You think back to that school bullying and stuff. And I know this is a bit of a tangent, but that stuff comes home with you if it's online and you can't get rid of it. But I think sort of having, it's like everything in terms of health, isn't it? Balance.
Yeah.
So whether it's diet, whether it's exercise, whether it is smoking, drinking, social media, how much time you put into it and how much time you take away from it to then engage on other things. If you're not going too far down the rabbit hole with it, you're probably okay. But if you're spending all your time scrolling, that's where you're going to come into a detriment. But that point on memory, I think, is...
really interesting. Yeah, for sure.
There's been studies that have been done. I think there was a professor at Harvard that looked at the impact of sort of tech and things on memory and said that actually it's not that tech is getting rid of our capacity to remember, but it's disrupting it. As you were saying with the professor from Holt, it disrupts your ability to process and remember and to think about things. So yeah, I can totally believe that.
Yeah, for sure. Like I think there's always, it's not that surprising that there's going to be, a difference in how social media impacts adults who are in their, mid late 20s or older versus adolescents versus teenagers, people who are still, they're still coming of age in that kind of situation. But I guess it begs the question, whose responsibility is it to set those boundaries? Again, is it the parents? Is it the providers? Is it the actual major conglomerates?
I think it rests with everybody.
Yeah,
it's an interesting question for sure.
Society,
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen it in the UK recently that there are schools that are actually implementing smartphone bans.
Yeah.
Right? And it's not just it's not just the ability to text your mate in school. It's actually probably because it's so easy to access.
Yeah.
Social media platforms while literally on school grounds. So you're seeing this wave, but then again, it's not surprising because I bet you the age, I mean, I don't have any kids, as far as I'm aware, but no, that's really bad. I don't know why I said that. I stand by it. I'm pretty confident I don't have kids.
We're going to come out of the woodwork now.
They're going to be like, oh, Johnny, I want some money. I've got none.
My kids' social media addictions.
I am not surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if the age that kids are wanting smartphones or wanting access to really popular social media platforms is probably a lot lower than, I mean, when I think I was like 11, 12 when I got my first phone, and it obviously wasn't a smartphone. But I wouldn't be surprised if pre 10 years old, there are probably kids that are wanting access to smart, probably because they have access to their parents' phones.
Yeah, exactly.
And this isn't to pass judgment on parents allowing, kids access to smartphones or anything like that. It's just the fact that whether social media platforms ever admit to it or not, they're probably marketing themselves towards a far younger demographic than they will ever publicly admit to.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that about the new teenage accounts, really, and maybe that's Meta trying to market towards teenagers, but
in a responsible
marketing it as an
manner.
ethical.
Yeah, because you're right, it comes back down to responsibility, doesn't it? And where that responsibility lies. And yes, everyone needs to take some personal account of the time they're spending online or the time their children are spending looking on socials and scrolling. But also, these companies have something to answer as well in terms of how their services can protect the well-being of their users.
And it's not feasible. It's just not feasible on a global level because there is such a difference of opinion between, like, even say here in the UK versus the United States, particularly in the coming months if the administration changes, which it will change if it changes sides, changes colours. They civil liberties over there is how are they going to let the equivalent of Big Brother kind of tell you what you can and can't what social media platforms you can use, what you can allow your kids to use.
You can't.
No, so how
it's out in the world now.
How on earth you regulate that on a global level is for someone far more intelligent than I don't. It's not up to me.
But in terms of personal accountability, going back to the Said study and the findings, for me reading that, it all comes back to how it's personal accountability and how you choose to engage. So in terms of social media, to keep it sort of friendly and protect your well-being, it's actually spending more time with the people that actually outside of social media mean something to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The people you'd actually want to waste your time or spend your time with.
Waste your time.
Have you since install?
Yes, I re-downloaded it.
Yeah, you'll keep.
And I've gone back to my toxic doom scrolling habits, but
you know what, I think
we'll learn eventually.
Maybe it's like
hopefully.
some form of masochism. You just really
It
enjoy
might
it.
be. Yes, very well might be.
Maybe.
So the next article we'll talk about is one about being burnt out. So new research from EM Lyon shows that between 40 and 50% of workers are bored or exhausted.
Wow.
The research conducted a study of over 2,700 employees across a period of 18 months, both in Finland and in the UK. So they asked participants questions about their workplace stresses, how they were finding their job roles, whether they're experiencing boredom and exhaustion, and so on. They found that between 40 and 50% of all employees surveyed were either bored or exhausted or both. And this experience of exhaustion and boredom did not change for the better during the 18 months of the study. If it did change, it was worse.
Wow.
Gosh.
So they blame intense and mundane corporate processes, red tapes, regulations, and role conflict. So yeah, what do we think about that?
It's a pretty damning stat, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
That is essentially half of your workforce that don't want to be there or don't feel capable of doing the job due to not because of their actual skills, but because of the pressure of doing the work and the environment that they're in. I mean, that's not what any employer is heading for when they're bringing in their workforce. And particularly, we're talking about well-being. So many companies now market themselves as a good place to work, an employer that cares, all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So when you then read that, at some companies, you've got 40 to 50 staff that actually, for one reason or another, are just at their wits' ends with it. That's pretty damning.
Yeah. I mean,
You're not surprised, are you?
No, I'm not surprised. No, I feel like burnout, though, the term burnout is almost like, in a corporate setting, it's that term that will forever be associated with this period of time, because we forget as people we are working we are the most efficient we've ever been thanks to things like technology. We're working at rates that are far quicker than people 10, 20, 30 years ago. So it's highly likely that in this endless pursuit of efficiency, productivity, whatever you want to call it, people are just being worked really, really hard. I don't doubt that, and I think it's probably almost a silent narrative, probably isn't the way to put it, but a subtle narrative that is the only way to succeed in certain firms, in certain environments, anyway, certain lines of work. That is just how much you can do, and if you're optimized because you're working, with access to modern technologies, you're working at just such a quick rate, but there's always going to be that demand from your employer to go a little bit more. So I'm not surprised. I'm really not.
Do you think people are more efficient than ever before?
I would say so. I mean, take the line of work we're in, right? PR, media relations. People talk about press clippings. We have AI that we use to put together coverage reports for clients. We can upload, hundreds of media hits and it be sorted within like a minute or two. Press clippings refers to the literal act of cutting them out. I mean, that's way before my time, obviously.
I don't think of it like that. Yeah, that's think about.
It's literally a clipping. So I guess we are probably working at a far faster rate than. So I think sometimes more than anything, it's a call to action. I think people just need to kind of give themselves a break and just realize, no, you're working really quickly. I know that the kind of the trope that's almost associated with people in their 20s, and I take it genuinely quite personally as being someone who's in his mid-20s, that we can't hack the workload, and it's like, no, we've got a pretty hefty one. We work really quickly. We just have access to technologies that they weren't available just only years prior.
So the researchers say that employers should make sure admin roles or other mundane tasks have as little red tape as possible, that workers are not given too high a workload to handle from the beginning, and that they should keep a close eye on employees that may be showing signs of boredom or being close to burning out. But I guess when we're all working from home, that's actually quite hard to monitor.
Probably
Yeah.
really is hard.
Yeah.
On a hybrid level, I don't know how you could track someone's, particularly like boredom. So someone's, how engaged they are with the task they're performing.
Mm.
And again, it comes back to like we talked a minute ago about social media, and we can't have this kind of blanket rule or blanket kind of approach. There might be certain tasks that I may find aggressively boring that one of you two think, oh, well, that's really riveting. I find that really satisfying. So I don't know, but it doesn't surprise me that, impact of bureaucracy has on kind of people's, again, sense of self in the workplace. I'm not surprised. Bureaucracy, I mean, we know that red tape's generally never a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things that's unavoidable. Obviously, companies have responsibilities to be able to do certain things in certain ways, whether it's legal responsibilities or moral, ethical. There's always going to be a degree of red tape. In the same way, there's always going to be a degree of admin in a role. And like you say, those jobs that perhaps you really put off or you don't like doing. Some people thrive on stuff like that. Others find it really dull and, they don't see it as a good use of their time. So it becomes the last thing to do and then it builds up and up. So there's certain things that I don't think you can avoid. Companies have an obligation to offer a workforce or offer a workplace and a job and a role that, obviously hires great people and does the job and profits and keeps getting better. Like you say, that demand to continually improve on last year's successes.
Yeah.
But also does so in a way that's legal and fair and ethical. And with that comes red tape. So I don't think, you can't say, we'll cut that out entirely, get rid of it. That's completely unfeasible. It's not going to happen. But having a good sense of what has to be kept, what can be sort of put by the wayside or be given to somebody else to deal with who does thrive in that area, so that basically you're allocating your jobs and your staff and you're giving them conditions and working environments that they can feel comfier in, and thrive in and do more and actually want to be a part of. And a lot of that comes down to what you said a minute ago about sense of self and autonomy and doing a job that you want to be doing. I mean, work is a place of work. Yes, you have a responsibility, but you also spend, like you say, we're a very busy generation. You spend more time at work than you do with your family, with your friends, with your kids. You get 2 days at the weekend to satisfy your own interests. The majority of your week is at work. So it's important that, for your health and your well-being, that the work that you're doing has some value to you.
Yeah. I mean, it's been proven that companies that invest in their staff do generally have higher well-being. A study from Blarick Business School found that founders who create a psychologically safe space for their employees are more likely to see their startup scale quicker.
Yeah.
So it does have a very positive effect on the business.
This is it.
They gave the example of Candy Kittens, the sweet company. I don't know if you've tried this.
Jamie Lang from Main Chelsea.
That's right.
It was his, wasn't it? Yeah.
And he got him and his co-founder, whose name I can't remember. But it's really, really successful these days.
This is it. I mean, the Candy Kittens was the example that we used for the article that we wrote for it on Blue Sky Thinking. I can't remember what industry the study looked at in particular from the Flerick piece. But the findings there were absolutely spot on in that regard, that an employer who takes the time to invest in their staff's well-being and doesn't just tap into the productivity and what they can do, but also tries to create a job that people want to do. He finds out about the employees' interests and their values, and whether it is offering slightly more like flexible hours or healthcare, or it could be something little like that, or it could actually just be giving them space to create their own ideas and take a bit of ownership and a bit of direction in a company. They're the things that can not only make a member of staff happier, but in terms of your profitability and the work that your company then does, it then has a really positive impact because the people are working at something they want to be working for. And so they're then motivated to see it succeed. So things then get better. So it does have that win-win. It's not wishy-washy to say, I'll give my staff extra holiday because it looks good. Actually, there's a proper benefit behind it as well.
Yeah, they suggested work perks such as unlimited holiday, hybrid working, flexible hours, early finish Friday, monthly socials, private healthcare, things like that.
I think that's all stuff that sort of Candy Kittens market themselves as a company, as something that they then offer to get staff on board. But I think it's really easy to see that sort of stuff as a gimmick.
Yeah, no, I see what you mean about the prospect of it looking like a gimmick. And I'm sure it's not. I'm sure, there's, but I can understand that, if you're feeling burnt out, worked really, really hard, early finish. If you're feeling like your workload is so intense that you're working yourself, you're burning the candle at both ends, turning around telling me, oh, you can have your Friday afternoons off.
Pizza Fridays.
Pizza Fridays, free coffee in the office.
Yeah.
I'm always very dubious of you when you hear about like the major big tech firms, offering certain perks in the office anyway, like, doing your laundry in the office. I'm like, that's just because they want to keep you there.
Yeah.
That's
Doing your laundry in the office.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure. I can't remember who it is. I'm not going to try and like name a company.
That's probably for the best.
Yeah.
Pull them up.
Get a lawsuit. I'll just hand it over to Kerry and be like, there you go. Responsibility. But no, yeah. I'm a little bit dubious of certain perks to tackle broader issues like burnout.
Yeah.
Like, I guess work-life boredom as well. I don't really think, extra holiday is going to address that. I think it's a more deep, like you say, it's actually about tailoring the work to really suit the individual that's performing the task.
How do you think the companies could deal with that then? Like make people less bored, less stressed? What would you do?
Chloe, you make me say I'm a solutions guy. No, I like to poke holes in. If I'm honest with you, I think it would be really hard on a multinational conglomerate level. It probably would be really hard. So I take my proverbial hat off to any businesses that are trying to make it a more kind of tailored and personalized experience at work. Because I just don't know how that would work on such a massive level. And in certain industries where there is an element of rigidity.
Like finance, for example.
Yeah, I would imagine finance is probably one of those industries where there's a reason why these individuals have such large salaries. It's probably because, I know they're working with money, but it's probably also because there probably isn't much flexibility to be afforded. But I don't know. I mean, I've never worked in that industry, but I think smaller companies, they just, I think those elements of flexibility, and I don't mean, you can start at, X o'clock and finish at this time, or you can work from wherever you want. I think it's actually like, no, you kind of set, what you need to do to do the job. You do it how you see fit and you do it around your life. And as long as you get the job done at the end of the week, we're all good.
Lots of tech companies implement that, don't they?
Yeah.
Like, I know Google's notorious for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it comes back to autonomy, giving some staff like you say, the space to be able to conduct their job in the way that works best for them. Like you say, you can't do that for every role. And certainly in really big companies, that's probably really hard to extrapolate on a really big level.
Yeah.
But for a smaller company where you can have those conversations and a manager can have that direct contact with an employee and actually check in with them rather than just assigning duties, that could be something that could be created. I mean, I wouldn't say easily, my goodness, I'd never say that, but it's something that would be possible and achievable. And you do see it, like you say, in these smaller companies, like startups and things, actually they are really quite flexible. I mean, the fact that you mentioned Google and the way they might do things, and that's a big company that perhaps in that respect might be bucking the trend.
I don't really know much about Google's day-to-day working
policy, but I was press release based on what you've just said.
Oh right, yeah. Basing this on the internship or whatever it was called from like 2008.
But going back to things like we were talking, I think on a previous podcast about, and certainly for Blue Sky Thinking articles, about things like return to work mandates and return to the office, and whether you then have the flexibility of working at home or whether you have to commute in every day, and the resistance that some companies are putting up to that. And you've got, on one hand, one big company that's saying everyone must be in 9 to 5. It's better for our morale. It's better for everyone getting together, and it's better for everyone's well-being so we can all speak to each other. And then you have, I think, is it Spotify that have said, actually, we're okay. People can still work from home if they want to. We're going to let our staff be.
Well, what do you think though about the return to the office? Do you think it should be like one or the other, or split, or what?
I don't think people can go back, is my personal view. I think generationally, we've now got a group of adults coming into the workforce who have always had very good tech. So they've been able to do things at home quite easily. And in that respect, probably haven't experienced the traditional 9 to 5 in an office workplace. That's not been the norm. That's not been their go-to.
Yeah.
And then we've come off the back of 4 or 5 years where we've had to stay at home, and then we've had to reintroduce ourselves to the workplace gradually. And now we've got all these cool tools. and capabilities that allow us to do both. And people's lives have molded to fit that.
Yeah.
My own life, it's quite nice that we work in a hybrid capacity. We've got the office, we can come in, but also I can do just as good a job at home and not have to worry about the commute, not have to worry about the things in my personal life that might need a bigger time commitment, because if I'm at home, I can fit them all in easier.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd want to be fully remote every single day. I think I'd then feel quite cut off, and that goes into then well-being and mental health and not being able to engage with people. But I think, someone, like you say, it's all down to your personal preference. Some people might see it very differently, but I think the generation coming in are probably going to be more, they're going to advocate more for that flexibility and for keeping it as a right rather than as a privilege.
Well, it's been possible for ages, hasn't it? Like, we've known for years and years that it's possible to work from home. And it did seem a bit stupid that we were going to the office day after day when we could just work from our laptops, the same laptops that you're bringing into the office.
Yes.
And then COVID happened, and obviously we did work from home, and it made sense. So to say that you have to go back to the office full time now just seems ridiculous. What's the reason for it?
What do you think is the reason that some companies are saying go back?
Well,
to the office then?
they're blaming like workplace well-being and the culture and all of that, don't they? But the reality is, I think that they're paying for an office space and they want people to use it.
Do you know what? I bet you that probably is that probably is a reason, particularly if you'd recently invested, particularly in like London, for example, hundreds upon hundreds of millions of pounds.
Exactly, central London, like
yeah. It's
rent prices for offices.
Yeah, I guess it's up to employers to really make the case as to why the experience in the office would really add value. Is there something you can't do at home? That's because there are certain situations where actually, no, it is much easier to be in the flesh. Like right now, even like the podcast, it probably wouldn't sound as good if the three of us were on Teams right now or Zoom.
Yeah.
Like there'd be like a tinniness to it maybe. But I think that hard pressed to find a reason, like 5 reasons a week on different days where get in the office now. Yeah, maybe not.
So speaking of working from home, the next article is about how neuroticism can make working from home harder and how managers can help. So employees with higher levels of neuroticism they struggle to adjust to remote work, experiencing lower job satisfaction and well-being due to emotional instability, anxiety, and the disruption of structured environments. The study surveyed 337 employees who had transitioned from office-based to remote work during lockdown, and they looked at factors such as job satisfaction, work readiness, using questionnaires. They found that employees with higher levels of neuroticism reported decreased job satisfaction and struggled with their overall well-being when they had to work from home. The loss of social interaction, coupled with the challenges of balancing home and work life, intensified those feelings of stress and uncertainty. So yeah, I'm not that surprised by that personally. If you are quite neurotic, so you worry about things, you're easily disturbed, you've got mood swings and you're irritated easily, I can see why working from home, often alone, could enhance those feelings. And what do you think?
I mean, I think, well, I'm in agreement with you. Sort of the very sensible, perspective on this is that not everybody likes to have things the same as somebody else. Mm-hmm. We're all different. We're human. We all have different strengths, weaknesses, things we enjoy. This is why we have introverts and extroverts. How people engage is very different from one person to the next. And whereas some people might thrive being in an office 9 to 5 and socially they love the engagement of it, they love being able to see people and chat to people and have them at face value, being at home sometimes removes that. And it's not as easy to catch someone for a quick chat when you've got to schedule in a Teams call for that 5-minute chat. You might then decide, actually, does it even need a call? I'm disrupting their day. I'm not going to go and tap them on the shoulder, sort of, not physically, but, metaphorically tap them on the shoulder and say, can I drag you away from what you're doing to have a catch up? So I think it can be we all experienced that isolation during COVID where we all actually had to stay home and couldn't come out. But I do think it can be quite isolating if you're working from home 9 to 5. And if you haven't got your colleagues sat next to you, your boss over there, someone that you can quickly run through something with if you're feeling a bit wobbly about it. I mean, quite easily, I can see the stresses of that beginning to build up. And if you are naturally inclined to be a bit of a worrier, I'm not going to be as glib to say neuroticism is just being a bit of a worrier. But if you have a personality where, you do tend to focus on those things, working from home on your own, not feeling like you can reach out to anybody, that's going to build.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's quite. I think it was covered a fair bit a few years ago in the height of kind of the pandemic and working from home. The challenges that certain people find in asking for help remotely, as exactly what you just mentioned. Like, I think it would be, particularly if you are one of those individuals who is struggling, but you don't necessarily thrive in a kind of in a more isolated environment. You need to be able to have the comfort to ask someone for help, whatever that help may be, whether it's literally like, I'm struggling to understand this task, or it's just, I'm not having a great day, because you can ask help in many different ways. It probably is much harder for some to do so from home, and then you combine that with those kind of traits that are associated with neuroticism and the kind of negative emotions that are far more prevalent.
Yeah.
Right. And it probably is just it's a bit of a spiral, because that probably doesn't help you in carrying out that task, in which, you need more support, and then the feelings get worse. And no, I can understand. I mean, listen, as everyone was going to say, I like working from home. I work from home a lot.
Yeah.
What do you like about it?
We work in a creative industry, right? So we spend a lot of time, as you guys know, crafting long copy. And so isolation, I sometimes just find it easy to focus. I love coming to the office and speaking to colleagues and stuff like that. But we're also so savvy with tech that, I can get hold of you guys just as quickly by pinging you a message on Teams. And we all keep in contact so much. But I mean, we work in a line of work where, it is really conducive for being at home. I'm sure even if you had, I mean, we do have the option, but I'm sure even if you were encouraged to come into the office, more frequently, you probably still kind of earmark like a day, maybe even two, depending on the work, the week, to just say, no, I'm gonna write a really long form article, and I can't do that with someone talking in my ear. It's weird, because actually, when I first started out, it was just before the pandemic. Actually, I could write long form pieces while in the office, but now I can't. So I don't know. I honestly don't know what the kind of solution is. I think it comes back to what you just said, Kerry, which is about, tailoring environments to suit the individual.
Yeah. I mean, there's one thing that if you're working from home, you don't get that you'd get in the office. And they're those sort of visual cues as to how people are doing and how they're feeling and what they're getting on with. If someone walks into the office and they just look a bit downcast, or you see those visible signs of stress, if someone's sitting there hammering away on a laptop, you can then check in with a colleague. Or if you're a boss, you can check in with your staff and have that conversation with them. Obviously, if they're then 50 miles down the road, sat at home working, you don't know what their morning's been like. You see the productivity, right? So you might see them on a Teams call where you've got the whole group there together and you can see them, but the only judgment you've got on sort of how they're getting on is the work they're turning around.
Yeah.
Which is where you find problems, I think, in terms of workplace monitoring and work when you're working from home. And there's been so much research that's been done into how managers then assess their staff to make sure that when they're at home, they actually are doing the jobs and they're checking in. And you have very well-meaning managers wanting to seem visible to their staff.
Yeah.
And they want to check in, but from the perspective of the employee who's sitting at home trying to work, they're thinking, well, my boss has never reached out to me this much before, checking in, asking questions. Is there something wrong? Am I doing a good enough job? Are they checking in because I'm not working hard enough?
It can almost look like micromanaging.
Exactly.
And that's exactly what this study says, actually. It says that organisations should focus on fostering empowerment through clear communication and autonomy while avoiding that micromanagement that we mentioned.
Yeah.
And they should provide employees with the necessary tools and, that they need to create a supportive home environment.
Yeah.
I'm someone that likes coming into the office. I come in once a week minimum.
Yeah.
Because I like being around other people. And when I'm alone, I do tend to stress more than I would do in the office. And I think it's just like having those thoughts to yourself and overthinking. And I find when I come into the office, it negates that quite a lot. So
What do you find that when you're in the office talking things through more, or?
Yeah. It's just like things that on my own I would overthink. I could just casually mention, and somebody has an idea, somebody else has an idea. Like, say you're pitching, somebody knows who to pitch to. That could have taken you quite a while to find that person on your own, for example. Even when I'm writing, I might not write in the office, because I agree with you, Johnny. Like, it's much easier to write at home, and I do better writing at home. But those ideas, like throwing those around, actually chatting it through and having those conversations about how you're feeling and what's going on, and you can learn a lot, I think, from being in the office. And I think that's why it works for me. But I can see why people like you, for example, would work better at home.
I guess it comes down to the simple fact that people are like, we're social animals. We enjoy. I mean, even though I'm working from home, I still enjoy interacting with people. And I think looking at my work at home, it comes simply from a case of productivity. I find myself, even though I'm still productive when I'm here in the office, obviously, I find myself more productive at home. Because you could, exercise a little bit of more freedom in terms of how you use your time and stuff like that. And, what's your priority? So if somebody messages me, but I'm in the middle of doing something, it's different to someone coming up and tapping on the shoulder, because you don't have to actually respond there and then. Often I do, because it's just, I prefer to address things there and then. But again, that comes down to I feel like that's the recurrent theme throughout this entire podcast has been, the fact that people are different. They should be treated accordingly. They should be treated as individuals. Blanket policies don't necessarily work.
I think exactly when it comes to showing, isn't it, really? That personality types work differently in different conditions.
100%. I agree.
Yeah. So yeah, they're all the articles we had to talk about today. Which one has been the most surprising, do you think, Johnny?
Surprising probably isn't the right word. I think the second piece about burnout and exhaustion, I think more than anything, the thing that interested me most is that it probably would seem to like an organizational psychologist two very obvious traits or kind of feelings, emotions to put together. I would never think about boredom and like kind of burnout in the same
interesting
conversation. I don't know. You wouldn't seek to address them at the same time. But I guess when I'm thinking back to it now, they probably can present in similar ways. Apathy, probably people associate apathy with disinterest, but actually no, it's probably sheer exhaustion on a level that's a day off won't address. So yeah, I think that was definitely the one that's interesting. But there's so much work that's been done recently around well-being that's fascinating.
Yeah. What about you, Kerry? Which one was most interesting, surprising?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to just sort of echo Johnny, because that's not the most exciting thing to say. Oh yeah, what he said. But I agree. The second study certainly, because I think we've all been very aware of the dangers and the advantages of social media and things like that. For the first one, so it does make sense to me that actually engaging with people that you care about would be a benefit to you for your mental health. But certainly looking at the high levels of burnout, of boredom, I think if anything, that is a signal to employers, to people that are running businesses. That number is so high to say, actually, yeah, it really does pay to not just focus on what your staff can do for you, not just look at the numbers and the stats and the work that they're doing, but because people have changed generationally as well. People have changed. People don't mindlessly go to work anymore. Every day we see stories of how people want to work in roles where they feel like they're not just benefiting financially, but they're actually making an impact. They're leaving a legacy. And whether that is something as idealistic as climate change, or whether it's actually just doing a job a little bit better and finding a clever solution for something, or just supporting another person. People genuinely want to work in roles where they feel like they matter, or they're doing something that matters. And if you deny them that opportunity, not only are they then not really engaged with the work, so as an employer, you've either got staff that aren't working as well as they could be, or they're out the door looking for something else, and you've lost some really great talent. But then, you've also got but you say productivity falling, your company isn't going to be as successful. So actually taking a few little steps to make sure that your staff feel seen and heard and are happy and taking their ideas on board. I mean, you don't have to do a lot to do that, but the potential payoff is huge.
Yeah.
So I think
As the Valeric study shows, it can
Exactly.
increase your profits or
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that's, whether you're a tiny startup like the Valeric study looks at, or whether you are a bigger company, actually realizing your people have ideas and suggestions and might want to work in a slightly different way. And that's not a bad thing.
yeah.
I think that is, I think that's incredibly powerful. And you were talking about earlier with perks and things, you can write off these things as being gimmicky to get people through the door. But actually, a lot of them, if they're devised correctly and marketed in the right way, they hold a huge amount of value.
They're probably
So-
all very well intentioned.
Yeah.
I just sometimes think maybe
I wasn't criticising you.
Let me defend myself, Kerry. They're probably all very
Just
well
defended
intentioned.
half of LinkedIn
It's just I just don't sometimes think, free coffee and free fruit doesn't sometimes fix when you're
Doesn't cut it.
no, it doesn't when you're
No.
when you're drowning in workload.
And this is it. It's got to be pitched right. It's got to be done with the right. I'm going to say research behind it, but that seems a bit formal as well. You can't just throw free donuts at a situation and expect all your staff to magically get happier.
No,
It's got to have a bit more depth.
No, exactly.
Food won't solve the issues here.
No, particularly,
I like a
maybe
donut.
maybe donuts though. I think when they're like, free fruit bowl, I'm like, excuse me.
I don't like donuts,
Do you like-
so that wouldn't work on me, I'm
Wow.
afraid.
Controversial.
It is controversial.
What notes made the podcast?
I know.
But what about for you in terms of studies?
I think for me, the first one about social media was the most impactful. Because as I say, I doom scroll a lot and it could sort of get me to use social media in a different way, a more positive way where I'm focusing more on speaking to my family and friends. And I think also, because I mentioned before, didn't I, that posting feels a lot more positive than consuming.
Yeah.
And that might be why. It's because I'm connecting to friends and family rather than just mindlessly consuming content.
Do you think
So,
that's the takeaway then? Is that the
How you
takeaway should be
use it.
for the user?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fair enough. Interesting.
So thank you for joining us today, Johnny.
Thank you.
We'll be back next week for an episode about consumerism. So we have Black Friday coming up. We've got Christmas, obviously, not too far away. It's already nearly November. It's November. And all of us are spending more. And so we'll be looking at consumer habits and consumer traits. So join us next time for that.